In the Badlands of Colorado, the life of 18-year-old Adeline Finch wasn't measured in years. It was measured in the silence between her father's rages. Silas Finch was a man hollowed out by the earth. He went looking for gold and found only dust and fury. And every night he brought that fury home and spent it on his only daughter. Their cabin wasn't a home. It was a cage. The only comfort was the wind, howling through the canyons, because sometimes it was loud enough to drown out her own weeping. Adeline had learned the art of being invisible. She moved like smoke. She knew the exact creak of the floorboard that would set him off. She knew the precise moment to clear his plate before his disappointment turned to violence. Her world was a map of threats, a constant, terrified calculation. One afternoon, the sky bled out in shades of bruised purple, as if the heavens themselves were wounded. Silas came home, but the usual simmering anger was gone. In its place was a terrifying, vacant stillness. He'd been fired from the mining company. His last hope had turned to ash. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply turned, his face a mask of ruin. And in that moment, Adeline saw that the man was gone, replaced by something broken, something determined to break the last thing he had power over. This time, when his hand rose, she knew it was different. It wasn't a punishment. It was an eraser, a primal instinct, buried for years under a mountain of fear, suddenly caught fire. As his shadow fell over her, she knew with chilling certainty that staying in that cabin for one more minute was the same as accepting her own grave. She launched herself from her stool, a choked cry tearing from her throat as she bolted for the door. The wood splintered against her shoulder as she threw her weight against it, bursting out into the frigid night. She didn't look back. To look back was to see the monster in the doorway. To look back was to let her legs fail. So she ran. She ran from the flickering, malevolent yellow light spilling from the cabin, a stain on the clean darkness. She ran from the sound of her own name being roared into the wind. The ground was a treacherous landscape of sharp rocks and unseen gullies, but she felt none of it. Her world had shrunk to the burning in her lungs and the frantic, panicked drumming of her own heart. A strange clarity began to cut through her fear. Every ragged breath she drew was her own. Every aching muscle was a testament to her own will to survive. The pain was different now. It was the searing pain of exertion, of flight, of life itself refusing to be extinguished. Deeper into the rocky hills she went, until the familiar landmarks of her oppressive world vanished. Finally, she allowed herself to stumble to a halt. Hidden behind a curtain of ancient junipers, she leaned against the cold stone, her body trembling uncontrollably. It was then, as her fingers scrabbled for purchase, that she felt it. Not the rough texture of the stone. It was a series of smooth, deliberate notches, carved into the rock and weathered by countless seasons. Her fingers traced them in the dark, feeling the unmistakable rhythm of a human hand. Below the notches, tied to the root of a bush, was a small bundle of hawk feathers, a marker, a sign. This land was not empty. It had a secret language, a history written in stone and feather that she had been utterly blind to. The discovery sent a strange wave of calm through her. She was not the first soul to flee into this darkness. That small, silent discovery was the final thread connecting her to her old life. And it snapped. Exhaustion, held at bay by adrenaline, descended like a physical weight. Her legs, which had carried her so far, finally buckled. She crumpled to the earth. The last thing she saw was the vast, indifferent sweep of the Milky Way. The last thing she felt was the cold, hard embrace of the Colorado soil. Her spirit drifted into a profound silence, suspended in the vast, waiting wilderness. Consciousness returned not as a jolt, but as a slow, creeping dawn. The first thing she smelled was pine smoke, dried herbs and a clean, earthy aroma she couldn't place. She was lying on something soft, a bed of pine needles covered with a thick, warm bison pelt. A gentle warmth radiated from a small fire nearby. For a long moment, she kept her eyes closed, convinced she was dreaming. When she finally found the courage to open them, she saw him. He was sitting by the fire, his back to her, mending a piece of leather. He was an old man, his frame lean but strong, his long gray hair tied back with a strip of hide. When he turned, she saw a face that seemed carved from the canyons themselves, a terrain of deep lines and weathered patience. His eyes were dark, but they held no malice. They held a profound and ancient stillness. Her body reacted before her mind could. A jolt of pure, conditioned terror seized her. She tried to scramble away, but a cry of pain escaped her as her battered muscles protested. The man simply watched her, his expression unchanging. He made no move to stop her, no move to approach. This simple inaction was more disarming than any word he could have spoken. The days that followed unfolded in the same quiet rhythm. The man, Kenai, tended to her with a silent, methodical grace. He would leave a bowl of warm broth and a cup of cool water near her, then retreat, never watching to see if she ate. He cleaned her wounds, applying poultices that cooled the fire in her skin. His hands were rough, but his touch was impossibly gentle. Adeline, who had only ever known touch as a precursor to pain, was utterly bewildered. This man asked for nothing, demanded no gratitude. He simply provided what was necessary for life to continue. Her fear slowly gave way to a deep, weary curiosity. As her strength returned, she took in the details of her sanctuary. It was a hidden camp, tucked into an alcove in a secret canyon. Everything had its place, a life distilled to its essentials. And then she saw it. Folded neatly in a corner was a wool blanket. The pattern was a series of interlocking diamonds, woven in deep indigo blue and warm earthy ochre. The sight was like a key turning in a long-locked room in her memory. Her mother, her face young and unlined, wrapping that very same pattern around Adeline's small shoulders, humming a song without words. The memory was so vivid, so painful, it stole her breath. This place, this man, was somehow connected to the only source of pure love she had ever known. Her desperate flight had not been random. It was the first step on a path that had been waiting for her all along. One evening, as the sun painted the canyon walls in strokes of fire, Kenai approached. He knelt and placed two items on the flat rock before her. The first was a familiar wooden bowl, steaming with a nourishing stew. The second was a small leather pouch. He opened it slightly, revealing a collection of dried pale roots. He didn't need to explain. Adeline knew that in that pouch lay a sleep from which there was no waking. The choice was hers, the bowl or the pouch, life or the oblivion she had once so desperately craved. Her gaze lingered on the pouch. It was an end to memory, an end to scars, the easy peace. But when she looked at the bowl, she saw more than broth. She saw the patient hands that had gathered the ingredients. She saw the quiet fire that had warmed it. She saw the profound, unspoken belief that her life was worth saving. She saw her mother's blanket, a single vibrant thread of love stretching across a wasteland of years. To choose the pouch would be to sever that thread. To choose the pouch would be to let Silas Finch have the final victory. A slow, determined fire ignited in her chest. With a hand that trembled only slightly, she reached past the pouch of final sleep and took the bowl. She lifted it to her lips and drank. It was more than sustenance. It was an oath. Each sip was a declaration that she would not be erased. She was choosing to live. From that day forward, everything changed. The wilderness, once a terrifying void, became a living classroom. Kenai became her silent tutor. He showed her how to find water by watching the flight paths of finches. He taught her which roots healed and which brought fever. She learned to move with the quiet, deliberate steps of a hunter. Her hands, once raw from lye soap, now grew calloused from new work, grinding acorns into flour, stripping sinew for cordage, sparking a flame with a fire bow. His approval was a quiet nod, a silent gesture of trust more valuable than any applause. They were the building blocks of a new self, a person defined not by her suffering, but by her competence. Her first test came as the seasons turned. The small stream that was their lifeblood began to drop, a faint metallic bitterness tainting its taste. Kenai grew troubled, convinced a blockage high in the canyon was the cause. But Adeline, her senses honed by years of predicting her father's rages, saw what he missed. A thin whitish film on the rocks, the sickly yellow of the willow roots. She remembered a small rock slide in a side ravine weeks before. Her intuition screamed. She led Kenai into the narrow ravine. The air was heavy with the smell of sulfur. The rock slide had not blocked the stream, but had sheared away the hill, exposing a raw vein of pale, yellow-streaked ore. Rainwater trickled over the exposed minerals, carrying its poison down into their spring. Kenai stood in silence, looking from the poisoned rock to the young woman beside him. He had been looking for a problem of brute force. She had seen the truth in a whisper of evidence. In that moment, the dynamic between them shifted. They were no longer savior and survivor. They were partners. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a brief, firm gesture of profound respect. They worked for 2 days, building a diversion channel of logs and clay. It was grueling, shared work that left Adeline feeling more whole than she had ever been. As they returned to camp, weary but triumphant, a deep peace settled over her. This was no longer just a refuge. It was a home she had helped save. But as they stepped into the clearing, the peaceful silence was violently broken. In the soft earth near their fire pit were two sets of deep prints left by shod horses, and lying on its side, half buried in the dirt, was a dark green bottle. Its label bore the familiar name of a cheap brand of whiskey. The sanctuary was no longer secret. The world of violent, careless men had found her. The discarded bottle was a venomous snake in their sanctuary. The poison of the world she had fled was not contained. It seeped through the land itself. They did not have to wait long. Two men rode into the clearing, their movements clumsy and loud. They were prospectors, their faces coarsened by greed. When they saw Kenai, they dismounted, their spurs jingling. They approached with a swaggering intimidation that was sickeningly familiar to Adeline. Watching from a crevice in the rocks, she felt her breath catch. It was happening again. The taller of the two shoved Kenai's shoulder, a casual act of disrespect. They began to taunt him, convinced he was hiding some treasure. Then the second man, eager to boast, revealed the terrible truth. He laughed, a wheezing, unpleasant sound. He spoke of their incredible luck, how they had found this hidden paradise by following a faded hand-drawn map. A map they had bought in Creed from the belongings of a pathetic old miner who had died alone. A stubborn drunk, the man mocked, who swore this land owed him a fortune. A man who had left nothing behind but a dilapidated cabin and a reputation for cruelty. With a final, chilling detail, he mentioned the miner's name, Silas Finch. The name struck Adeline with the force of a physical blow. It was not chance that had brought these men here. It was the ghost of her own father. His obsessive greed had outlived him, reaching out from the grave to lead this new evil directly to her door. That realization shattered her paralysis. This was not her father's prison. This was her home. She would not allow her father's legacy to destroy it. A desperate, dangerous plan formed in her mind. She could not fight these men with force, but her father had taught her about the weaknesses of cruel men, and Kenai had taught her about the secrets of the earth. She slipped away, moving with a silence Kenai had taught her. Her destination was a small patch of earth, where a cluster of innocent-looking white flowers grew. Kenai had warned her their roots held the spirit of Coyote's bile, a fast-acting poison that would bring a strong man to his knees. She dug up a handful of the fleshy roots. She prepared a simple stew, and into the pot she grated the pale, fibrous poison. Then she transformed herself. She let her shoulders slump, adopted the vacant stare of a frightened, simple-minded girl, and approached the prospectors' camp, holding out the pot as a peace offering. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see, a half-wit girl of no consequence. They laughed, snatching the pot. They ate quickly and greedily. The effect was astonishingly fast. The laughter died, replaced by choked groans. Their faces turned a sickly green. Their arrogance dissolved into panicked, wretched sickness. Within minutes, they were stumbling blindly for their horses, convinced the canyon itself was cursed, and fled without a backward glance. The threat was gone, vanquished not by steel, but by a simple root and a deep understanding of human cruelty. Adeline stood trembling. She turned to Kenai, expecting to see relief, perhaps even pride. But his expression was one she had never seen before. It was a look of profound, heart-wrenching sorrow. He saw not the frightened girl she had pretended to be, but the calculating survivor she had been forced to become. He saw the chilling precision of her actions. He walked toward her, and in a voice that was barely more than a whisper, he looked deep into her soul and asked a question that laid her entire past bare. "What brutal world," he said, his voice heavy with a terrible empathy, "could teach a child to serve a meal with such a quiet and perfect hatred?" Kanai's question was not an accusation. It was an invitation to lay down the weapon she carried inside her. For the first time, Adeline felt safe enough to bear the weight of her past. The words came in broken fragments. She spoke of the silence, of a man's love twisted into a fist, of the endless, suffocating dust. And she spoke of her mother, a woman she barely remembered, and the single vivid memory sparked by the woven blanket. When she fell silent, Kenai simply nodded. He rose and went into his small, rock-sheltered dwelling. He returned with a small object cupped in his hands. He opened his palms. Lying there was a small wooden bird, its paint faded to the palest shade of blue, its form worn smooth by time. He began to speak. He told a story of his wife, Laughing Brook, and of a young white woman who would visit their camp. A woman with hair the color of corn silk and eyes that held the kindness of the summer sky. She was different. She looked at his people not with fear, but with respect. He said the woman had a gentle spirit, and one day she had come to them with her newborn daughter. He had carved this small bluebird, he explained, as a gift for the child. As he spoke, Adeline's world reformed around an astonishing new center. He was talking about her mother. His wife had been her mother's friend. This revelation was a seismic shift. Her rescue had not been a random act of kindness. It was the closing of a sacred circle, a debt of friendship being repaid across a generation. She was not an outsider. In a way she could never have imagined, she was coming home. The fear that had been Adeline's constant shadow finally receded. They worked together in a new, effortless harmony. She learned the Chiricahua names for the stars, and she told him the stories her school teacher had once told her of the same constellations. Two languages for the same sky. Her laughter returned, at first a quiet, rusty thing, but soon a genuine expression of a spirit remembering how to be light. The canyon, once a refuge, was now a true home. But the world of straight lines and sharp steel has little respect for circles. The peace was broken on a crisp autumn afternoon, not by drunken shouts, but by the clean crunch of heavy boots on gravel. A man appeared at the entrance to their canyon. He wore a crisp, clean uniform and carried a surveyor's transit. He unrolled a map, a stark white page covered in a grid of black lines that carved the mountains into neat, soulless squares. He informed them with the cold authority of a government decree that this land had been annexed, charted, and sectioned for settlement. Their canyon, their home, was now designated as Lot 73, and according to the paper he held, they were trespassing. The surveyor's map was a weapon that could dismantle their world without firing a single shot. In the face of this new, sterile violence, Kenai's posture seemed to shrink. He showed not anger, but a profound, bone-deep weariness. This was the final echo of a war that had been lost long ago. But Adeline was not weary. She was incandescent with a rage so pure, it felt like a physical force. She had not survived her father's fists, only to be defeated by a piece of paper. This sanctuary had given her a soul, and she would not let it be taken. She refused to accept Kenai's quiet surrender. His voice was silent to the world of deeds and laws. He was a ghost they would politely sweep aside. But she was not. She was a white woman. Her voice, however small and trembling, was one they might be compelled to hear. To save her home, she had to leave it. To protect Kenai, she had to face the world that had tried to destroy her. It was the ultimate sacrifice. She stood before Kenai, a reluctant warrior. She explained her plan. She would go to the new settlement of Silverton. She would find the family who held the deed, and she would stand before them, not as a beggar, but as a witness. Then without a tear, she turned and walked toward the mouth of the canyon, a small figure outlined against the vast world she now had to face alone. The town of Silverton was a chaotic roar of shouting men and clanging hammers. Every face was a stranger's, their eyes holding a hardness that made her skin crawl. For hours, she was the ghost of the cabin all over again, making herself small, her confidence crumbling. But then she would feel the faint outline of the carved bluebird through the cloth of her bundle, a solid reminder of her purpose. She was not fleeing this world. She was confronting it. The Fairchild Land Office was the newest, proudest building on the main street. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. A man at a large oak desk looked up. He was older, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and a gentle, thoughtful face. This was Thomas Fairchild. His calm demeanor was more disarming than any aggression. He invited her to sit. For a moment, the old fear seized her, but she looked into his eyes and saw not a tyrant, but a man of conviction. A legal argument would be useless. The only thing she had was the truth, and so she told a story. Her voice, at first a whisper, grew stronger. She described a hidden canyon, not as property, but as a living sanctuary. She described an old man, not as a trespasser, but as its rightful guardian. She made him see Kenai not as a problem, but as a man whose existence was a sacred text he was about to burn without ever having read it. When she finished, a deep silence filled the office. Fairchild was moved, but she knew it wasn't enough. Words were air. He dealt in lines on a map. She reached into her bundle and placed the worn, smooth bluebird on the polished desk. He carved this, she said softly, more than 18 years ago. It was a gift for the infant daughter of a white woman who was a friend to his wife. She paused. That woman was my mother. I was that child. The small, faded toy sat between them, a bridge across time, a testament to a forgotten history of peace. It was undeniable proof that the lines between their worlds were not as sharp as the ones on his map. Thomas Fairchild stared at the bluebird, then at Adeline. He was a Quaker, a man of principle. He had come west to build a community of harmony, and this young woman had just shown him that his first act would be one of profound disharmony. After a silence that stretched for an eternity, he slowly rolled up the large map. The boundaries of Harmony Creek, he said, his voice thick with emotion, will not be drawn through a good man's home. The canyon will be left in peace. Adeline felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. She had won. But as she prepared to leave, Fairchild stopped her. He looked at her with a new intensity. You speak the language of two worlds, he said. I came here to build a bridge between them, but I see now that I do not know how. You do. He then made her an offer that shook her to her core. He asked her to stay, to work as a healer and a mediator for the new settlement, to be the bridge. The offer hung in the air, a crossroads. She had just won back her silence and solitude, and now she was being asked to step into the very center of the storm. She saw Kenai's weary face in her mind's eye. She saw the chasm between their two worlds. To return to her canyon would be to turn her back on the man who had taught her what true strength was. She understood the final lesson Kenai had been teaching her all along. Survival is for the self, but a life of purpose is for others. With a quiet nod, she accepted. Years passed. Harmony Creek was not a perfect utopia, but it was different. It was a place where fences were lower, where Ute and Apache families were treated as neighbors. And at the heart of that peace was Adeline. She was known simply as the healer, the bridge woman. Her cabin was a bridge itself, between the tidy grid of the town and the untamed wilderness. People of all kinds found their way to her door, and to each she offered not just remedies, but a deep, non-judgmental listening. On a warm evening in late summer, Adeline made the familiar journey back to her canyon. Kenai was much older now, frail, but his spirit was as bright as ever. They sat by the fire in comfortable silence. He told her he had one last gift. From an old leather bag, he retrieved a small, intricately beaded medicine bundle. It was ancient, radiating a quiet power. It belonged to my wife, Laughing Brook, he said softly. She was a bridge woman, too. She believed that one day a healer would come to this valley, a child born of two worlds, one of great pain from your people, and one of great kindness from mine. She said this child would have the strength to weave the torn pieces of our worlds back together. Then he revealed the final, astonishing truth. Adeline's mother had been more than a friend. She had been his wife's devoted student, learning the Apache way of healing. Laughing Brook had been preparing this very medicine bundle for her, believing she might be the one to fulfill the prophecy. But when Silas Finch dragged his wife away into isolation and cruelty, the circle was broken. My wife's spirit waited, Kenai said, placing the bundle in Adeline's hands. And when I found you, broken at the edge of the rocks, I knew it had not been wrong. It had only been patient. Adeline looked down at the bundle, the threads of her life finally weaving together into a single, breathtaking tapestry. Her pain, her flight, her rescue, her purpose. It was not a series of accidents. It was a destiny, a legacy of healing passed down from a friendship between two women, a prophecy she was now fulfilling. She was not just a survivor. She was the answer to a prayer. Her name was never carved onto a grand monument, but her legacy was written in the quiet endurance of a community. She found her great love not in a single person, but in the family she built from the desperate souls of Harmony Creek. For true freedom, she had learned, is not the absence of bonds, but the strength to choose the bonds that heal the world. Did you enjoy this journey? Tell us what part of the world you're watching this story from. Leave a comment, and to not miss the next adventures, subscribe.